Hi everyone. Okay, so today in this session we're going to be looking at the events of the Peasants Revolt. Okay, so first of all we're going to have just a bit of a recap at what caused the Peasants Revolt. We're going to have a look at who was involved in the Peasants Revolt, what the actual events were, and then have a little bit of a discussion about what the consequences were. Okay, so we just have a look there. We've got a little timeline here. Okay, so in the Peasants Revolt was in 1381. Okay, and there's a lot of things that lead up to this revolt. Some short term, some long term. Now, if you've watched the Black Death videos that we did not long ago, we talked a little bit in those about how the Black Death and the shortage of labourers and then the statute of labourers led to the Peasants Revolt. They were some long-term effects. Some short-term effects are what is here. Now, hopefully you have studied these, the causes of them. I'm not going to go through them in too much detail. But we've got here the poll tax. Okay, now poll taxes weren't new. If you're not sure what a poll tax was, it was a standard tax where the king would send representatives to all the different towns and villages in the country and ask for a certain amount of money. Okay, now that might happen every year and the people would expect it, and it would be a certain amount of money, and if it's to be expected and it's standard, then that's fine and people were okay with that. Now, what I will point out at this stage was it wasn't necessarily the king in this instance. King Richard III at this time was actually only a very, very young boy. He was 11 years old when these poll taxes were being done, and it was actually his uncle who was ruling on his behalf who was implementing these poll taxes on his behalf. So the people weren't necessarily upset with the king, they were upset with the king's advisors. Okay, and they wanted to basically save the king from these advisors and let him know what was happening and what was happening to the people at the time. So the third poll tax in 4 years. So if we think we might expect the taxes once a year, we have them a lot more now, but these poll tax and going around and collecting extra money, the third one in 4 years is a lot. Okay, so what the other problem with these poll taxes was how they were being collected. So because some people genuinely could not afford to pay the poll taxes, they would go and hide in the woods and they weren't there when the tax collectors went round. Now that happened in the first one, and what Parliament were noticing was compared to the amount of money they should have been getting based on the population, they were actually getting a lot less, and that's because a lot of people were going hiding. So the next time they actually sent knights with the poll tax collectors, and they went and looked for the people who were in the woods and made sure that they paid. And you know, if they couldn't afford them, then they would take things from them. So everybody had to pay these poll taxes. There was no escaping them as time went on, because they did make sure you paid them, and you would suffer consequences if you didn't. Okay, so that's late in 1380. So we see then representatives from the towns, and the two places that we need to focus on are Essex and Kent. Okay, now they're two counties down south, and they are the two towns at the time that rebelled and that took people. Now the people who organised the Peasants Revolt went through the towns way down to London to recruit people, and their attitude was, you're either with us or you're against us. So as they were going down through trying to recruit people, they basically said, you're either coming with us or we're going to kill you. It was where you're either with us or you with the king. Okay, so let's have a look at this then. So the 30th of May 1381, the riots begin in Kent and Essex. Okay, so like we said, they were the two places that sent the rebels down to London. So Wat Tyler, that's the one we're going to come up again, come across again later on. So the 7th of 12th of June 1381, they marched towards London through Rochester and Canterbury. Okay, and this is where we said, as they were going through Rochester and Canterbury, they were recruiting as they went, and it was either you are, oh sorry, not for us or against us, you are either with or against us. So basically you're either coming with us or we're going to make sure that you're not against us and we're going to kill you on the way. So now another thing that I do want to know is I'm very keen on making sure that everybody's clear about who was involved in history, because the way that it's written a lot of the time is these men did that and these men did this. Now I tried to get some evidence when I was planning this for my classes at school of any women that were involved in the Peasants Revolt, and I was having a conversation with the historian Dan Jones, who writes about this period a lot about it, and I said, can you give me any examples of when women were involved in the Peasants Revolt? And he did say no. This was all men, so they weren't going trying to get women to join them. This was a pretty solely male event. Okay, so the rebels demand entry into the city of London. Now you might think, well, why would they need to enter London? Surely they can just walk into London. But actually at the time, cities had walls. So the city of London was walled and it also had gates. So they had to literally force their way in through these walls into the city of London. Now, before, it's not on this timeline, so I'm just going to add it in. Before they got to the city of London on the 11th of June, they go to a place called Lambeth and they destroy a lot of government records. Now, what's worth thinking about when we are talking about the Peasants' Revolt is what were the peasants aiming to do, and does their behaviour suggest that they were going to be successful? So if they're trying to say, look, Richard, this is the situation that we're in, we want you to help us, we want you to be more sympathetic towards us, we want you to stop the poll taxes, we want you to give us fair conditions, basically make our lives better than they are at the moment. Now, things like destroying government records, I don't know about you, but if I were in charge at that time, if the people were coming to me and saying, look, this is what we want, but to get it, we're going to do things like destroying your property, you're probably less likely to give them what they want. So their behaviour is something that we just need to keep an eye on and think, is this actually going to get them anywhere? So they destroy government records, then they demand entry into the city of London. Okay, and on the same day, on the 12th of June, they say, look, King Richard, if you come and meet us, we'll keep you safe. It's not you that we're after, it's all your government advisors that we don't agree with. So you come and meet us. As soon as they enter, he goes and hides in the Tower of London. And when he does actually go down to meet them. Okay, oh, sorry, I'm doing it from the wrong place here. He does actually go down to meet them on the 13th of June, 1381. He meets them, but he soon flees. Now, the reason that he flees, we'll just add that to here, is because he goes down the river, the Thames, in a barge, and he has on one side 60,000 rebels from Essex on one side, and then he has 50,000 from Kent on the other side. Okay, so he feels very vulnerable. Massive amounts of people, a lot more than he was actually expecting, and he runs away. Now, again, the Savoy Palace is destroyed. Now, the reason the rebels destroy the Savoy Palace is because this is the home of Richard's uncle, the one I was talking about earlier, who the people really want. And this man is called John of Gaunt, and that's where he lives, and that's why they destroy that palace. They think we're going to get his home. He isn't in there at the time, but we're going to get his home and teach him a lesson, basically. But again, you're destroying the guy who's running the country's palace. Is the king, who is his nephew, going to actually give you what you want if you're acting in this way? This isn't a peaceful protest. This is a very violent protest at this time. Okay, so then we've got the 14th of June, 1381. Richard does meet the rebels on the 14th of June, pardon me. He meets them at Mile End and agrees to their terms for the first time. So they say, this is what we want. And he says, right, fine, I'll give it to you. Now, think whether you think he actually means that. However, at the same time, rebels break into the Tower of London and execute Simon Sudbury and Robert Hales. Now, these are two important men in government, and just as the king has said, look, we'll give you what you want, that's absolutely fine, they go and they execute two of his advisors. You know, we've got to think, what would you have done in that situation? Do you think, would you have thought that that was a sensible thing to do? Would that have got you where you wanted to go? Probably not. So let's see what happens then. So on the 15th of June, the day after, Richard meets the rebels again and urges them to depart. He basically says, go home now, you've caused enough damage. I've said I'm going to give you what you want, just be done with you. So the Mayor of London fights with Tyler, that's Wat Tyler, the leader we've got up here, and kills him. Now they've got no leader, right? So with Tyler dead, the rebels are in a sticky situation because they have no leader, no commander, nobody to coordinate them. Their request would be heard, just go home, he says. Now, he might have meant that the first time, but since they have done quite a bit more damage, they've gone around London robbing quite a few houses, they've set fire to a lot of property. And on the 23rd of June, so he lets them get home and he withdraws all of the charters. So what that means is he goes back on his word. Okay. He basically says, I might have said this, but you know, after what you've done, I'm not going to do it. He goes back on his word, and what he then does, executions are ordered. He sends people on the 5th of July 1381 to Kent and Essex, and they are tried for treason. They are hung, drawn and quartered. So quite a lot of the rebels at this point, when executions are ordered, they are hunted down and killed, and then their heads are stuck on pikes at the side of the road. So what that means is that they get their heads, they stick like a piece of wood into the road, and then they put the heads on top of these pikes. And what he's saying here is, look, this is what will happen if you go against me. Okay, this is what is going to happen if you come and you demand and you do things like destroying government records, like burning down the house of the man who's running the country, like killing my advisors, fighting with the Mayor of London. So what the Peasants Revolt does is, it is very significant in history because it just shows how unhappy people were. And what you've always got to remember, and why this was so dangerous, is if we look at if we have the basically, if we look at the feudal system, if you've looked at this before, then if you've not, I'll just redraw it for you. So at the top, we've got the king, then we've got lords, just had an extra section there, then we've got knights, and then we've got peasants. Okay, and you can see, I'll just make that a little bit smaller just so it's more, there we go. You can see this biggest section here is the peasants, right? So that is the largest percentage of the people, and the reason the Peasants Revolt is so dangerous and needs to be handled really fiercely by the king after it is because this is a lot of people, and if they if they had even more of them and they did rise up again, they are very, very dangerous. So what it shows is that the feudal system might not be working anymore because the people at the bottom are very dissatisfied by the behaviour of the people at the top. And it means that something is going to have to change, because what the king can't risk is more of this big percentage of the population banding together and coming back, because then he might not win. Okay, so what Richard actually does and what actually happens within the next 50 years is, in the next 50 years, the rebels' demands. So here where we said he agrees to the terms and then he withdraws the charters, the rebels' demands are met. Okay, and you might be thinking, well, what's the point? Why is he just going to give them what they want? The point is that he does it in the king's own time. Okay, because that way he retains or keeps all of the power. So he's saying, right, you guys can't come down and demand it, I'm in charge. Because if he'd have given in then, especially after that behaviour, he will be saying, yeah, your behaviour is absolutely fine, you can come and do this and I'll just give you something. He's not doing that. He's saying, look, I'm the man in charge, I'm the one with the power, I've listened to you, that's fine, but I'm not going to make those changes now. I'm going to do it in my own good time. Okay, so quite a short period of time the revolt happens in, within a week, the actual body of it, but we can see the events and the consequences of very far before and very long afterwards the consequences last. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a good overview of the events of the revolt. If you haven't already, or you need a catch up on the causes of the Peasants Revolt, then go and watch that earlier video. But thank you all for joining me today, and hopefully I will see you in another video.